This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible with a copy of the game provided by Dejica Games. In episode 120 of Bullet Heaven, we took a look at Twinkle Star Sprites for the Sega Dreamcast. It may have been missing content from the extras heavy Saturn version, but it also included great language options and featured awesome versus-style gameplay that worked especially well against human opponents. Not many games of this kind exist, but recently Dejica Games released a brand new title that might just do the formula justice.
Rival Megagun is an indie versus-style vertical shooting game that was released on all major platforms between November 29th and December 6th of 2018. It takes the Twinkle Star Sprites formula and not only adds a series of enhancements, but also a critical modern element, online versus gameplay. With a story-based arcade mode and local versus in tow, there's plenty to play no matter the player. So what sets it apart? Let's take a closer look.
Rival Megagun has several different modes for players to take on. First up is the arcade mode, which follows the stories of a series of 6 different characters. Players have their choice between them, each with their own unique ships, firepower, speed, special attacks, and boss forms. As is typically the case for games such as this, it can take a little while for players to experiment with this roster to figure out which character works best for them.
Controlling the player's ship is more or less identical across all versions, but for this review, we'll be taking a look at the Steam version played on an Xbox-style pad. It's pretty simple. Players move their craft with the D-pad or analog stick on a controller. D-pad control is all or none when it comes to the ship's movements, but the analog stick allows for variable movement speed based on how far the stick is tilted. In the case of the Steam version, keyboard controls are also available.
Players fire their ship's main weapons with the A button. Fire is rapid and will continue for as long as players hold this button down. There is no cave-style focus fire and reduced speed here. Enemies are taken out one at a time in this game. While multiple enemies can be on screen at once, they do not explode in sequential chain fashion like in Twinkle Star Sprites. A hit indicator will appear on screen as players take out these foes, and will gradually disappear as if being eclipsed. So long as this indicator is on screen, it can be added to by defeating more enemies, and maintained if larger foes are hit.
As enemies are defeated, a gauge will build on the player's respective side of the screen. 2 layers to this gauge will be visible, a solid portion and a stippled overall progression. Both of these amounts are chargeable with the X button to engage a character's specific attack to better corner and trap the opposing player or CPU opponent. The solid amount can't be lost through collision, but the stippled amount represents how much of the gauge has been filled in the current chain. If the player is hit, the chain will be forcefully broken, and the player will lose the stippled amount down to the solid level.
If the player can fill this entire gauge, they can activate a boss transformation similar in a lot of ways to Senko no Ran by pressing Y. The player has access to 4 superpowered attacks, which can also be aimed slightly with the L and R triggers. This boss form can really turn the tides in a tense match, especially one that's been deadlocked for some time. This boss form does have finite health though, so it's entirely possible for it to be taken out with a skilled player or opponent. Additionally, a screen-clearing bomber is available to clear out the player's side of the screen if things get just a bit too hairy. This bomber is deployed with the B button.
Players will make their way through the selected character's scenario over the course of 7 stages. Or, if the true last boss is encountered, 8. In much the same way as Twinkle Star Sprites. In a double tate orientation, the player tries to overwhelm their opponent on the right side of the screen by destroying chains of enemies on the left side. In the case of both the player and their opponent, as more and more enemies are defeated, portals that summon drones to attack the opposing ship are launched to the opposite side of the screen. These drones can also be destroyed to increase the chain count.
Players have 2 hit points per round. If the player or their opponent is hit, they will go into danger status indicated by an exclamation point over their portrait. If they are hit again, they will lose the round. Thankfully, players are sometimes able to pick up a special item that will allow them to recover lost life, their bomb stock, or prolong their chains. This can be strategic, but it also helps in getting players out of prickly situations. In arcade mode, players will advance by winning against their opponent just once. With 3 lives at their disposal, a player still has a fighting chance if they end up getting hit one too many times in a particularly tricky round. Of course, in versus and online rounds, the matches are best 2 out of 3 by default.
A number of versus types are available in Rival Megagun. First, of course, is local versus, which features options for rounds against a human opponent, rounds against CPU opponents, or even a CPU versus CPU bout. Players can even create personalized weapon loadouts for their chosen character, which can really add a deep twist to the versus formula in terms of customizability. But the real replay value to Rival Megagun is found in its online versus matches, which would have been really cool to film if it weren't for the fact that there seems to be nobody playing this game on Steam. We waited forever and no one became available. Hopefully other versions will have a better online community for this game, since we had fun with the local stuff at least.
We felt that the game was really good on the whole, but a couple of things stuck out to us. The controls, for one, don't feel especially satisfying, though they can be acclimated to. The second is a bit of a given. The computer very obviously has an advantage against human players, as it will miraculously avoid pretty much anything the player can throw at them, especially on higher difficulties. Twinkle Star Sprites was more or less the same in this respect, and even a lot of versus-style puzzle games will behave in exactly the same kind of way. Par for the course, really. This game is much better suited for versus play against a human opponent anyway, though.
In the end, though, Rival Megagun may not be as complex as Twinkle Star Sprites when it comes to its main mechanics, but that might actually be a good thing. It's more approachable as a result, and the battles can be pretty impressive to watch without nearly as much effort as ADK's original. However, the roster may feel slightly lacking by comparison, and players looking for Twinkle Star Sprites' complexity may feel less inclined to stick with it. There is still a good amount of replay in Rival Megagun single-player scoring, though.
The scoring in Rival Megagun is super simple, almost to a fault. Essentially, players get a small amount of points for defeating various enemies and drones they encounter. 1,000-point bonus is also awarded for getting repairs past max health and bombs beyond max stock. Where the scoring becomes more important is in the end-round bonuses. This end-round bonus is made up of 3 main criteria: max hit, number of special attacks, and number of boss transformations.
The max hit rate is multiplied by itself for the player's applied bonus. So, if a player gets a maximum hit chain of 16, the result is 256, or 16 times 16. This can sometimes be pretty piddly though, so getting as high a hit rate as possible definitely helps in this respect.
Next is special attacks. The number of special attacks performed is multiplied by 100, so if a player pulls off, say, 10 special attacks, it will result in a 1,000-point bonus. This can also be a little on the small side for a bonus at the end of the stage, but if a sufficient amount of these attacks can be performed, it makes for a moderately satisfying addition to the score.
Finally, the number of transformations in a given round will be multiplied by 10,000 points. This is a much more significant amount, and will boost the player's pointage by a much larger margin than anything else in the game. The more it can be done, the better, obviously, but since these transformations take time to do, it can take a while to get these larger payouts, especially when special attacks will deplete power from the same gauge that transformation uses.
The top scores in Rival Megagun aren't tremendous. Our All Clear on Easy ranked in at 19th overall with 151,000 points and change. But on any difficulty, these scores aren't much higher with the exception of the top few on Easy, Normal, and Very Hard. The versus aspect of the game, therefore, is definitely still the main draw here, but at least there's still a bit of score chasiness to satisfy those looking to conquer a leaderboard or two. On the whole, Rival Megagun sports a pretty good audiovisual package that runs well on even modest systems like ours. That it's also on the Switch shows that the engine here is a pretty solid one and everything runs at a pretty buttery rate.
Rival Megagun's visuals do a great job of keeping everything nice and clearly visible, with sharp pixel-style graphics and smooth animation on everything from enemies to power-ups. Gauges are bright and vibrant, and shots can be clearly seen in any situation, even against sometimes bright, busy backgrounds. The animated scenes are also very impressive, given that they are all 100% sprite-based. All great, but while we felt that the ship and enemy design was also very strong, the character design was a little less impressive to us.
But one thing we loved all the way through was the sound, which is pretty great. Plenty of satisfying retro sound effects, announcer clips, explosions, and a great OST really sets the stage for your earballs. There's not much in this respect that we can complain about, really.
The story in Rival Megagun is more or less a flimsy setup that gets players from one stage to the next like a fighting game would. Aliens appear and start with Earth by scavenging space debris and satellites. Earth is like, nah-uh. Attacks are countered and twisties are twisted when the aliens are more powerful than expected. Over time, the aliens are held at bay by flinging junk at them to keep them satisfied, but nothing is ever enough. So a ragtag group of competitors have come together to compete in a televised deathmatch game show to take on the menace and bask in eternal glory, for various reasons and so forth. You know, standard stuff. Playing through the game with each character is sure to increase the replay of the game, as each has unique banter from one round to the next.
Rounding out the presentation is a simple but lavish menu system that allows players to access its various bits with little to no trouble. And of course, a number of achievements are available on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Steam versions. There's also a ton of lore to open up through various unlockable cards and extra gear for custom loadouts and verses, which should add a good amount of replay to the package. So, how does Rival Megagun stack up? Let's take a look. Rival Megagun features decent control, but it never really felt especially satisfying, especially with the D-pad.
It's still something that can be acclimated to, though.
Rival Megagun can make for a decently easy 1cc, but the real challenge is versus human players.
Online battles versus high-tier players can easily outweigh the games versus CPU matches.
While the game itself has 7 to 8 stages, taking the true last boss into account, being able to play against anyone around the world online makes for an infinite replay situation.
So long as there's people out there playing, that is. We tried and failed multiple times to find online matches on Steam. We hope others are playing elsewhere.
The pixel art visuals of Rival Megagun are excellent, and the backgrounds are slick.
We didn't care too much for the character design, though.
Rival Megagun sports a great OST and solid sound effects throughout.
Some of the music seemed as if it was right out of Mega Man and Bass, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Rival Megagun is more approachable than Twinkle Star Sprites, which is sure to broaden its appeal to newbies, but could push away or bore TSS vets.
The addition of online versus matches is an obvious and welcome evolutionary feature.
Rival Megagun weighs in at about $15, which is a great price point for this particular title.
As long as online matches can be found, it has potential to last forever, making for a great value.
Rival Megagun was a game that we were hesitant to check out, given that we don't often play games online to begin with. That we don't subscribe to online services like PSN or Switch Online is a pretty big indication. We chose Steam in the hopes that others felt as we did, but with no one online to take on, we were a bit disappointed. That's not the game's fault though. The right building blocks are here and they're pretty solid. Rival Megagun gets a 4 out of 5. You can get a copy of Rival Megagun on all major platforms for about $15. Well, that just about does it for 2018. We hope to get even more done in the new year with all new episodes and more retro coverage. Thank you all for making Studio Mudprints a channel worth producing. We'll see you all in 2019.